Hey, what's up tube? Wellington here and welcome to this video. Now, a lot of you have been asking me about what I think about the new firmware on the JBL Xtreme 2. Generally, I think that's a good thing because usually when someone sends out a firmware, they're either fixing something or making it better. So yeah, it's generally a good thing. I've been wanting to do this video ever since I saw the firmware update, but I didn't want to update it if I don't have time to be able to record some things and do some comparisons here and there. So today is a day we're going to be taking a closer look and analyze the new firmware in comparison to the old firmware on our new charge. I wish there was a new Charge 3, but to our new JBL Xtreme 2. Now I'm going to be using DC mode and AC mode a lot in this video. So for those of you who don't know what that means, when I say DC mode, I'm basically meaning that the speaker is playing off of its battery. So nothing it's not getting any current, it's not being charged while it's playing, okay? But when I say AC mode, I basically mean the speaker is plugged in and it's getting power to it, so it's charging while playing. That is the AC mode. DC mode, you might see a cord still attached to it during my test, but it doesn't mean that it's actually being charged. I'm gonna be turning off the switch down to the cord that brings it power, because during this test the speaker has to stay in the same place as I do all the recording, so I don't want to plug it in and unplug it, stuff like that, because that might move the speaker a little bit, which will interfere with the measurements that I'm trying to take and the sound that we're trying to record, and so it's not getting power even though you might see the cord. Is that clear? Okay, so as a reminder, here is our first test. We're going to remind ourselves the difference between the AC mode and DC mode on the old firmware. Okay, so that's been the old firmware without any updates yet, just reminding us of what the difference was with the old firmware. There's about 4 dB difference in sound loudness between the two modes on the old firmware. It's a huge gap, and that's why people were freaking out, including me, about why JBL decided to go that route. Okay, so now that we remember that, how did the Xtreme 2 compare to the JBL Xtreme before this firmware update? So we're going to be taking a listen again to the Xtreme 2 versus the JBL Xtreme before the firmware update on the JBL Xtreme 2. Take a listen. You get the point. The Xtreme is louder than the JBL Xtreme 2, both speakers running in DC mode on the old firmware. Okay, so we got that. Now, how about we go ahead and do the update to the JBL Xtreme 2 and see what the difference will be. Now, if you've never done an update on your speaker, when you open the JBL app, it will usually show you a little something that will basically show you that there's an update that you need to be doing to your speaker. Basically, all you have to do is make sure it's plugged in, just update it, and that's it. It's pretty easy to do an update on JBL speakers. Just make sure you don't close the app like it says on the app right there. So, well, after we do that, I have not moved the speaker at all. I did not move the speaker. I did not touch anything at all. And I went ahead and did some more recordings. Now, with the new firmware, let's find out what the difference is between the AC mode and DC mode on the JBL Xtreme 2. AC versus DC with the new firmware. Take a listen. Okay, and that sounds like good news because we now have 2 dB difference between the AC mode and DC mode. So yeah, it looks like it's an improvement. It's not all the way as loud as the AC mode, but it's a little bit better. It's a little bit louder than when it was on the old firmware. Actually, how about we go ahead and compare the old firmware playing in DC mode against the new firmware playing in DC mode and see how much of an improvement is there between the two modes. Old firmware versus new firmware speakers when the speaker is playing in DC mode both times. Let's check that out. That sounds about right. The new firmware is about 2 dB louder than the old firmware in DC mode. So yes, there is an improvement. I'm actually really happy that JBL listened. Now we're going to be looking and comparing the JBL Xtreme 2 to the JBL Xtreme. So we're going to be comparing the Xtreme 2 to the JBL Xtreme. This one is running the new firmware, and this one, well, it's old and it's running its old thing. So, but yeah, we're going to be comparing the two new firmware against the JBL Xtreme again, because we already did that video, but this was running the old firmware. So it's not going to be like a really long sample. I'm going to be using basically the same songs because I did not record a ton. There was a lot of recording involved, but we're going to be at least getting a small sample of the Xtreme 2 against the Xtreme 2 running the new firmware. Oh my gosh, I can't speak sometimes. I mean, it's a lot of words I'm trying to throw out here, but yes, how about we go into it? I think you get what I mean. Take a listen. I know it's not as many songs as I usually do, but that's because of what I'm trying to do. I did not have to move the speaker, and I only recorded a few songs because it took me forever doing all this recording. But anyways, from the few samples that you've heard, what do you think? According to my dB meter, which I did not move ever since I started recording, before the firmware and after the firmware, I did not move the dB meter, I did not move the microphone, I did not move the speaker. Everything was stationary throughout the recording. That's why I was waiting for a day when I have ample time on my hands to not move anything as I do this video, and that's what happened. But according to my dB meter, with the new firmware, the speaker only gets about 2 dB louder than old firmware. So in comparison to the JBL Xtreme 2, which I also measured in the same exact spot, in my update, the JBL Xtreme 2 is still not as loud as the JBL Xtreme. Now, do not get me wrong. I'm not saying that the update is not good enough or anything like that, because I do believe it is good, and the speaker is improved, definitely improved. It has a little bit of better bass performance, not like a ton, like not so noticeable, but it is a little bit better. The highs have been also tamed a little bit, so it sounds better than the JBL Xtreme, the old guy. But as far as loudness, between these two speakers, the Xtreme is still a louder speaker. It's not huge. I'm very happy that JBL went ahead and sent out a firmware update that quick. Like, that was quick. I mean, we've been complaining and hoping that they would send out a firmware, but I didn't think it was gonna be like this quick, because they usually would take forever. You know, we have to work it out with our engineers, blah blah and that. But this was relatively quick. I don't know if they just noticed that, yeah, this is pretty bad. And one thing I also noticed, I don't know if before we did not really talk about this because the difference is not that very big, but with the JBL Xtreme, there is also a sound difference between the two modes when you're in AC mode versus DC mode. But the difference was so subtle that, you know, nobody complained about it. It just makes a little bit of sense that way. The difference from measuring it, I had about 1 dB difference between the AC and DC mode. Whereas with the old firmware on the JBL Xtreme 2, was 4 dB difference. That is going to be so noticeable, and people were really mad about it, including me. So the Xtreme also does the same thing. It's just a little bit too subtle to be noticed as it was noticeable with the old firmware on the JBL Xtreme 2. Now, I still would have hoped for the speaker to be a little bit louder than that. I think my main thing maybe is at least for the speaker to be as loud as the JBL Xtreme, or a little bit louder, because it is bigger. You know what I mean? So I was hoping, like when I got the speaker the first time, I was hoping for it to be louder than the old Xtreme. That's not the case. It's still not the case. At least in my case, it's not still the case with the new firmware, but it is better. I want to make sure you guys are understanding that. It's better. The new firmware, it is better. But it still does not make the speaker louder than the charge. I keep saying charge. It's still not as loud as the old Xtreme in my case. But generally, I do like the new firmware. It sounds better and it gets louder than the old firmware, which is something I'm really thankful for. I still wouldn't take the charge, the Xtreme over the Xtreme 2. I think the Xtreme 2 is still a better speaker. It's newer, it's waterproof. It's really good sounding compared to the old speaker. Most especially at maximum volume, it sounds a lot nicer than when you compare it to the old speaker playing at maximum volume too. That's all I have to say about this new firmware. I don't know how long this video is gonna be. I feel like I've rambled a lot and I'm sorry for that, but I feel like I had to say so many things that it ended up going and going, so yeah, I'm sorry. But anyways, I'll put the links to this video, to these speakers, if you wanna go check it out, if you've been holding off. But I think I'm done with the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one, hopefully really soon. Is it soon? Probably. Thanks for watching. Bye.